All right, guys. So today I wanted to look at some data and numbers to try and see if we can find if there's any elite trainer boxes out there that are a little bit undervalued and which ones might actually be the best purchases right now in the current state of the Pokemon market. So obviously PokeOz, he is a very, very big, Pokemon investing YouTuber. He does a lot of good data, does a lot of good analysis. He's, made a lot of money, helped people make a lot of money. That's great. And what he talks about a lot is the comparison for booster boxes, specifically between the set price and the booster box price, and saying that they're strongly correlated. And I did, some charts of all this stuff, and that's definitely true. Here's Sun and Moon. You have the set price for, a bunch of different sets. You have the booster box price, and you can see the more expensive sets, the total set value. This is like if you added up, the value of every single raw card together, the set value and the booster box price generally correlate. And this makes sense because obviously a booster box is just a bunch of packs. You're trying to, get all the cards from these packs, and as the cards get more expensive and the packs get more expensive, the booster box, in theory should go up with it. And you can see here, again, Team Up's most expensive set, it's the most expensive booster box. There's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. And as you go down, you'll see the more expensive sets also have more expensive booster boxes. There's a couple outliers. There's a couple, maybe that are a little overrated, underrated, whatever. And you can also see that with Sword and Shield as well, Generally, if we sort by the set price, you can see the bigger sets are going to have more expensive booster boxes, and it kind of works its way down. Now, again, there's some ones that don't really make as much sense. The Sword and Shield booster box is $528, even though, it's got a lot cheaper set price than some of the other ones. So maybe it's a little bit overrated or overvalued. But again, you can generally use this to find overrated, underrated, overvalued, undervalued booster boxes. But can you do the same for ETBs? So I did this exact same, math and did this exact same kind of chart and analysis for the ETBs from Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield. Obviously, we have Scarlet and Violet. We have Mega Evolutions now. We even have older stuff like X and Y. But I like these two just as a starting point because they have had some time to age, but they're also, not too old where we don't have, all the data, or maybe, don't have as much relevant data, and they're not too new or we don't have enough data yet. So whatever. I looked at the Sun and Moon ETBs, and again, you can generally see some of the same things here. You can see the more expensive sets, like, it's no shock that the Team Up ETB is the most expensive ETB, and it also is the most expensive, set price. You can also see that Cosmic Eclipse, it has the second most set price, and it has like a top 3 or 4 ETB price. So again, it's number 2, and the ETB isn't number 2, it's actually number 4, but that's still pretty damn close. You can see Unified Minds, a very expensive set, has an expensive ETB. You can see Unbroken Bonds, a very expensive set, has a very expensive ETB. Then it starts to break down a little bit where, Lost Thunder has kind of a cheaper ETB and stuff like that. But also, if you start by sorting at the bottom, you can see that the cheapest set, Crimson Invasion, also has the cheapest ETB. Second cheapest is going to be Sun and Moon, also has the second cheapest ETB. Generally, the more expensive sets have the more expensive elite trainer boxes, and this kind of, goes in tandem with each other. But also, what you can see is that over time, the ratio of the set price to the ETB price also starts to kind of go down. You can see here the average set price to ETB price ratio is going to be 3.02. But when we do this same exercise for Sword and Shield, the average set price to ETB ratio is going to be 8.33. And again, this is something PokeOz talks about for booster boxes as well. You have a 1.2 average set price to booster box price ratio for Sun and Moon. The ratio generally gets closer and closer to 1 as these booster boxes and the sets get older. But if we do this for Sword and Shield, we can see, what is this, 23 divided by 12? It's going to be closer to 2, meaning that he thinks, a lot of these Sword and Shield booster boxes, they're going to get more expensive, and maybe they have, some room to like double in price or something like that. But again, also, if we do the same thing for the Sword and Shield ETBs and talk about how eventually they're going to get closer and closer to possibly this 3.0 ratio, and a lot of them are at this 8.33 ratio, then some of these Sword and Shield ETBs could be pretty undervalued right now. Now, again, ETBs and booster boxes are not the same thing. People a lot of times buy ETBs because they're nice display pieces. Some of them have very beautiful art on the front. Some of them really pop with a unique color or unique design. But at the end of the day, again, there also is some value tied to the set price. Obviously, if there's some chase card or something like that inside, that's going to help the value. But also, the packs inside are going to coincide with the set price and the value of the chase cards inside of them as well. If you have a really awesome, set with really expensive cards and really expensive packs inside your ETB, that's going to make the ETB go up in price over time. time. So also trying to keep in mind this ratio of that set price to ETB ratio might give us an idea of some good investments and values right now. So I want to start by just looking at the sun and moon ETBs and seeing if there's any outliers. You can see right here, one of the big outliers is Burning Shadow, setting at a $13.52 set price, but only a $264 ETB, meaning that possibly this Pokemon Burning Shadow's ETB could be a little bit underrated. Now, again, we got, a black ETB. It doesn't super stand out. I think it looks kind of cool, the black with like the silver and white and stuff. It definitely doesn't stand out and pop, but it could still look pretty cool. I think it's okay. Again, right now sitting at about $270. I think this could possibly, potentially, at least from this one data point or analysis point that we're going off of, could be one of the most underrated and one of the best possible investment for the next couple years ETBs from the Sun and Moon era. This is definitely something that I would keep in mind. You can see a lot of these other ones, right? Like I said, they're in that 3-to-2 ratio. I would say Celestial Storm looks like the most overrated ETB in terms of just the value in this regard. And Burning Shadow may be the most underrated. But again, when you go to look at Sword and Shield, it starts to become even more kind of polarizing and with maybe even some bigger opportunities. And the biggest thing here, the most interesting thing, is that Evolving Skies ETB. Now, again, Evolving Skies is the set of all sets from Sword and Shield. It's a set of all sets from Modern in a lot of ways. And I know this Sword and Shield one, or this Evolving Skies one, it could be a little bit split up because there's a couple of different, multiple different ETBs here, but still, again, it's an ETB with Evolutions on it. It's an ETB with Evolving Skies cards on the inside. It's really a no-brainer investment. And again, people have been so afraid of Evolving Skies stuff, the booster boxes and the ETBs, because they keep saying like, oh, they're already so expensive. Oh, they're already so overpriced. Oh, can they really continue to go up in value, whatever? And they just keep going up in value. And again, by every metric you look at, even when you look at the booster boxes, the Evolving Skies is one of the best ratios and potentially one of the most undervalued booster boxes right now. But it's also potentially one of the most undervalued ETBs. Yes, it is the most expensive ETB from Sword and Shield right now. No, that does not mean it cannot be undervalued, and possibly it is the best purchase going forward in the future from Sword and Shield ETBs, and I think that's pretty interesting. But you have a couple of other really, really interesting ones here as well. You have Astral Radiance sitting at a set price of almost $1,000 with an $86 booster box. So you want to talk about something that is, cheap and maybe still has some potential to run up and stuff. Obviously, here you have the Darkrai on the front. This black and red looks sick together. This is one of those ETBs that I actually think, stands out in a cool way and actually would pop on a shelf and look nice as a display piece, but also is potentially a little bit undervalued by the metrics. This one is perhaps my favorite from all of these, though, the Brilliant Stars. You got Arceus. It's white and gold. This thing pops. It shines. It stands out. If you see this on a shelf, you would see this. Your eyes would catch it. This is an ETB that, potentially is undervalued in terms of the cards and the things inside of it and the set prices and the packs and all that, but also doubles as a very, very nice display piece. So again, this Brilliant Stars one, based off the eye test, based off the collectability, but also based off the numbers, could be one of the most underrated ETBs right now. You also have a couple of other ones like Chilling Rain. Again, this is another one with a couple of different ETBs, so I'm not really sure how that factors into, affecting the prices and stuff like that. You also have the Silver Tempest, which is kind of cool. It's like a little bit of an interesting, different design, but again, here you have a $1,000 set price with only a $100 ETB they're able to pick up. And then even Lost Origin potentially becomes a very, very interesting one as well. But then again, you go down and you look at something else that's been really, really popular lately. A ton of people talking about Fusion Strike, and I love Fusion Strike. Fusion Strike's a very, very good set with a ton of awesome cards and stuff in it like that. But you can see here that the ETB to set price ratio ends up being not as great. Now, again, Fusion Strike in a lot of ways still checks the boxes. It's got a great Pokemon on the front. It's an interesting and unique color. It pops. It stands out on your shelf. But is it maybe already a little bit overpriced and overvalued? And again, that could definitely be because there's a ton of people talking about how good of an investment, how good of pickup all this Fusion Strike stuff is right now. And that could mean, there's a bigger pump going forward in the future, but it also could mean that there's other underrated, more undervalued places that you should be looking in the markets instead. I don't know. So again, that's just something I think you should keep in mind. I think I love what Pokeoz does in terms of the set price to booster box ratio, but I think there's also some value in looking at, again, not the exact same thing, maybe not as strong of a correlation, but still an interesting data point to look at between the set price to ETB ratio, and that's led me to believe that Evolving Skies, Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, these could be some of the best pickups in the ETB market right now, and these are definitely things I'm going to be keeping in mind when I make my future purchases as well, and maybe in the future we can look at some other sets like, Scarlet and Violet or X and Y or whatever, but I think this is just an interesting way that I've never really seen anybody look at ETBs before, that maybe you want to keep in mind. But that's pretty much every video today, guys. Hope to catch you in the next one. Until then, peace.